Hey, Allie, thanks so much for deciding to be on my podcast. I really appreciate you taking up the time to do it. Do you want to just give a quick introduction of yourself as well as the topic we'll be talking about today?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Sam. As you said, my name is Allie. I am a sophomore at Yale. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to navigate friendships and what are the best ways to make friendships in college.
Perfect. Let's get right into it. So, going back to when you entered college not too long ago, can you just talk a bit about how you're feeling and your ideas of how you might make friendships? And then we'll get into how those friendships actually form. But just how were you feeling when you first got to campus and were settling in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a bit more background about me. I am a pretty introverted person, which doesn't mean that I don't enjoy spending time with close friends. But it does mean that I find making new relationships and interacting with a ton of different new people right off the bat to be pretty intimidating. So, I was honestly pretty anxious about the social scene in college before college, more anxious than I was excited for sure. And also, another important piece of background information about me is that when I transitioned to high school, from a middle school and a lower school that I'd been going to my whole life, that transition was awful. So I didn't know anyone at my high school and I didn't meet friends for months on end. So I was quite worried that my college experience would be like that. But when I got to college, it was not like that at all. Um, it's not like that at all in college because, first of all, everyone is meeting new people. So it's not like anyone has a leg up. It's not like anyone already knows 50% of the student body. The student body is very large, by the way. But aside from that entirely, everyone is coming in nervous and trying to make friends just like me. And there are plenty of introverts sprinkled into that mix. Um, so overall, I was very anxious, but I was pleasantly surprised that the setting of going into college was nothing like any other school transition that I experienced in the past.
Good. No, I'm glad. And feel free to elaborate as much or as little as you want, but what exactly was like so awful about going from like the lower school to your high school? Like what happened there?
Yeah. I well, first of all, my middle school and my lower school was a very small group. 28 students went to that school, and the friends I met at that school are still my closest friends in the world. We've known each other for forever. And so I think that it's pretty innately difficult to match that. But what was so daunting for me about high school is that I felt like, or it was true that 50% of the students who were going into ninth grade alongside me already knew each other. And I felt like a large percentage of even the new students who were matriculating into the high school for the first time already knew each other because they all played a sport in the fall. So, and I'm not an athlete. I didn't play sport in the fall. So I had this very overwhelming and upsetting feeling that I was just behind and there was no way that I could make friends, given that everyone else already had a head start and already knew each other. And college is really not like that at all. The percentage of the student body that are athletes is far lower. There are definitely pre-orientation programs offered by some schools, including Yale, that offer students a chance to get to know like a small cohort of people before the school year starts, but no one really has a leg up before pre-orientation, which is open to everybody.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I'm glad you have found the transition from middle school to high school, or sorry, from high school to college better than middle school to high school, which I think is hopefully a lot of people's experiences too. Unless people sound like really great high school transitions. So yes, you get to Yale, you're like settling in and you're feeling like everyone, like you said, like everyone's a bit nervous. So talk about when you felt like you had your first real like close friend or like group of friends, but just walk me a bit through like that process of when you felt the most comfortable with someone or a group.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll go back to something I just mentioned, which is pre-orientation programs. I know that not all schools offer these, but I think it's becoming increasingly common to offer them. I know that at Yale, they decided last year to make pre-orientation programs mandatory for incoming freshmen, and they also made them free as a result. So I would highly recommend doing a pre-orientation program. It's a great way to meet a small group of people, doing some activity so that you don't have to feel like you're constantly focused on making conversation with the people around you. But it's a great way to ease you into that new college environment. So I am not currently friends with anyone who was on my pre-orientation trip, which was like a trip into the woods where we camped for about a week. But regardless, I know that for the first month of school, I felt so much more comfortable knowing that I had a safety net of 10 other freshmen who were in the woods alone with me, who barely knew anyone else besides me, who were there for me and who I had talked to alone in the woods, made bonds with them, and I could reach out to them while I was on campus. So my pre-orientation program, although it wasn't a moment of, wow, this is my home and these will be my best friends forever, it was certainly a moment of demystification of what the college social life would be like, given that no one knows each other and everyone is eager to meet and make friends. So I would say, yeah, pre-orientation was my first moment of like increasing comfort. But really the first time that I felt like I belonged at Yale, and like Yale like is my second home, is when I started to become close with the people that I'm living with. So at Yale, there is a suite system, which means that all first years live in a suite with somewhere between 4 and like 8 other people usually. So I was placed into a suite with 5 other girls, and they are my best friends. They are basically my family. And when I met them, first of all, I could tell that they were eager to become friends with me, and they were very open to that, which was a really nice feeling and a feeling I didn't experience in high school. But just by continuing day-to-day life, living with these girls, that brought us closer together. For example, one thing that really helped me to become close to them and to feel like I was forming really deep relationships was after classes, instead of going in my room and starting my work immediately or really just like zoning in on the academics, I would just sit in my common room for a while and wait for the other girls to come in. And we would talk about anything, what their day was like, I don't know, a TV show that we watched the other day. And that's where it would start. But then it would always devolve into some sort of a debate about something that someone learned in class, or I don't know, an argument about whether The Bachelor is feminist or something like that. And then usually it would become a little bit more intimate, like people sharing stories about back home, about their family. And so those common room conversations were very instrumental to my ability to make close friendships. And yeah, I would say in conclusion, I would say the advice that I have about how to feel like how to try to maximize your chances of making close friendships at the beginning of college is to really have the mindset that everyone else is looking for friends, and you should, even if you're an introvert and even if it's scary for you, you should go out on a limb. Don't allow yourself to be alone in a moment where you could be putting yourself out there, sitting in the common room and waiting to have a social opportunity.
Yes, no, that's amazing. And I'm really glad that you have those friends with you. I think that friendships are one of the most important and valuable parts of college. And definitely it's not a straight path for anyone, but sounds like you were able to go through the pre-orientation, have a good suite of people to live with, and definitely everyone listening, take Allie's advice on that. Now let's talk a bit on the flip side. So what were moments either with where you were living or what you're studying, which feel free to talk about, or the clubs you were interested where maybe you expected to be able to make friends with people who had similar club interests, similar major interests, similar academic interests, but maybe it fell short in terms of like not having the closest friendship. So talk a bit about when you tried and you felt like the friendship vibes weren't quite as there as you might have expected.
Yeah, good question. And I have a couple of important points here. Overall, I do not want to give the impression that my social life is perfect and I've never felt moments of loneliness or frustration about my social life. So that's very key to note. But I would starting, I'm going to talk about classes and extracurriculars. So starting with classes, first of all, I'm a history major. That's not super relevant, but just a side note. And I've made a few quote unquote friends or acquaintances through classes, but I found them to be very situational. So for example, I took calculus at the beginning of my freshman year, and I had some groups with whom I would do problem sets. The same for economics class. And I haven't found that those sorts of friendships usually last far beyond the duration of the class. And this surprised me and kind of upset me because, people always told me, oh, like every time when you take new classes, that's a new opportunity to make friends. I also haven't really, I think I've observed a few friends making some friends through classes, but I don't think I've ever observed anyone making close friends through classes, just because they do tend to be very situational. And I don't want to say transactional because that's a little bit too cynical, but they're not friendships that are founded on like a foundation of caring about the other person necessarily. So that's been my experience with classes. Now, extracurriculars, I think, can really tip the scale in terms of how fulfilled my social life has been, at least. So my first year, I was inundated with club options. And I'm sure that wherever you go to college, you will feel the same way. Every college on the college tour likes to say, we have 5,000 student clubs, and it's really hard to sort through them. So don't be too hard on yourself if you don't find the right clubs your first year. In fact, I didn't find the right clubs my first year. I ended up joining my sort of main extracurricular was a social justice oriented club that had a great mission that I resonated with so much. I took on a leadership position in the club right off the bat. Like, I applied for one and I got it, which in my opinion is a mistake. Do not commit yourself to being a leader in a club that you've never done before, especially your first year, because it will take time away from pursuits that will genuinely help you make friends. And it's not worth it. But this club had an amazing mission, and I felt like I was doing something to be helpful to the world by doing this club. But because it was so goal-oriented and it drew people who were so goal-oriented into the club, that is, we were working towards completing certain tasks on behalf of the overall social justice-oriented mission. The club didn't have social gatherings. We did most of our work over Zoom meetings. And I think that in general, clubs that are very goal-oriented really prioritize much less the human interaction component. So even though I had the opportunity to probably, if I wanted to, maybe apply to elevate myself in this organization this year, I decided to quit the club because it wasn't helping me to make friends, and I really recognized that extracurriculars could be a much more fruitful opportunity to make friends. So I ended up quitting most of the extracurriculars I did last year, which was difficult because I was like, oh, well, there's a lower chance that if I join as a sophomore, I'll get a leadership role in this club. It might not be the best for my resume, et cetera, et cetera. If I join a person-oriented club, will it also be less impressive? But really, in my opinion, forming meaningful relationships is one of the most, if not the most, important component of college. So having realized that, I joined new clubs. And obviously, friendships take time to make. So I didn't join these new clubs and then immediately have my best friends in the whole world. But I joined 2 new clubs that have been really important to me this year. And close to the end of the first semester, so about a month ago or a month and a half ago, I really started to realize that some changes were taking hold, that I had new friends. Like I could use the word friend when describing folks that I was meeting through these clubs. And that's because these clubs are people oriented. They want to hang out outside of the meetings. They schedule dinners together. They schedule trips together. They schedule parties together. And so these have been really realizing the difference between a person-oriented and a goal-oriented club was crucial to me making friends. And then towards the end of the last semester, I sort of on a whim ended up applying to be the social chair for one of my clubs, and I won. And so now I get to spend a lot more time being with the people that I really enjoy being with from that club, which has so far in the first 2 weeks of this second semester have been wonderful. So yeah, that's how classes and extracurriculars, in my opinion, fit into the social life at college.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think those experiences you've had so far are definitely super valuable. And I agree with a lot of the points that you brought up. Going a bit more in the extracurriculars, you talk about that shift from the first school year where you were in that goal-oriented social justice club, and then this school year definitely shifting to, as you described, like people-oriented clubs. Just in case like people might be unfamiliar with the structures, and obviously this is on a college by college basis, but like how do you differentiate clubs that appear more goal oriented with the ones that are more people oriented? Like how do you actually figure that out? Is it something like you only really figure out if you're in the club, or is it something that you can start figuring out as you're like applying or trying to get into it?
Good question. First of all, it's very, at least at Yale, it's very difficult to understand as a freshman that you can quit clubs, because something that I didn't realize would happen was I applied to a bunch of clubs, got rejected from plenty, and I got into some. And as soon as they accepted me, they were like, okay, you are now committed. Here's the first meeting. Show up. You like, don't slack. I was immediately locked into clubs. And I don't really think I realized that in reality, no one could bind me into a club, and I could shop a club, vibe check the people in the club, see if they genuinely enjoy being with each other, if they meet in person or on Zoom, if they schedule meals with each other, if they have trips planned, if they have parties together, etc. And then if that wasn't the case, then I could just quit the club, and you don't have to spend time doing that if that's not going to meet your needs or your goals socially. So I would say as a first year, feel comfortable shopping clubs and quitting them if they are not people oriented from those metrics that I just named. So that's advice that I would have for first years who don't really know, usually who don't know any older students at the school, and who really have to determine for themselves what clubs would meet their needs. But as you're a sophomore and older, and again, you can join new clubs as a sophomore, you can quit your old clubs as a sophomore. You don't have to be locked in. I had scheduled meetings with several upperclassmen who I, at least from my perception, seemed to be in clubs that were meeting their social needs, and who seemed to be really fulfilled, and who seemed really invested in their clubs. And I talked with them about, very candidly, about what I wanted to avoid doing this year in terms of clubs. I talked to them about my interests, and I asked them what clubs are on their radar that they perceive to be socially oriented. So yes, in my opinion and experience, and this is just an overall college tip, it applies to academics, career, social life. Find mentors and advisors who can help you. Like, you're not alone. There's institutional wisdom and individual wisdom that you can tap into in order to like help navigate the cesspool of club options that you have.
Yes, for sure. I think mentorship is very, very important. And I'm very excited to see you as a mentor as well, or once again, a mentor once you're a junior and upperclassman. And just wrapping it all up, where do we kind of go from here? You're a second semester sophomore. You clearly have had a lot of friendship and people experiences under your belt. Now you're a year and a half into college. Like, what are some, I don't want to say goals because we were just talking about people over goals, but what are some ideas you might have on how to continue expanding your relationships, your friendships that you have in mind for this semester and beyond?
Yeah, so there are two components for, I think, where I want to go from here, and goals that I have for myself, one of which is more difficult than the other for me. I'll start with a more difficult goal. So the first goal I have is to continue to put myself out there even more to making new friends. Now that I have a family here, I have some new friends. I can feel very confident that even if I embarrass myself, I will still have friends. So to me, that's the logic I use to convince myself to put myself out there, say yes to social events. It's okay if you miss a reading or two. If you think that you have a really good social opportunity that might help you to make really meaningful relationships, or even to just have fun and put yourself in a situation where you might meet someone who you want to get lunch with or something. So that would be goal number one for me. Just say yes, put myself out there in a social setting. And goal number two is to increase the depth of the relationships that I already have and that I've been making. So as an introvert, this is an easier feat for me because it doesn't involve meeting new people and involves putting more time into the friendships that I already know I can count on and bring me happiness. But it is very important to having a fulfilled social life. I know plenty of people who have a lot of people who they wave to when they're walking to classes, way more people than me, or something like that. But they might not have like a depth of relationship that they want to have. So that's the next step. Like, put yourself out there with the people you already know. Ask someone what they're doing on a weekend, and ask if you can come along, or ask someone if they want to get a meal with you. Things like that are also really, really important to just improving my social life even more. So that's where I'm going
Yeah,
from.
no, for sure. And I have full confidence that you're going to achieve both of those and plenty more. And just, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. Thank you so much again, Allie, for being on my podcast. I think that all the things you said were super, super helpful. And is there anything else you'd like to add on before we wrap it up?
No, I think we touched on a bunch of really important stuff, and it's been lovely to speak with you, Sam.